The rain came down in sheets that September afternoon in 1878, turning the dusty streets of El Paso, Texas, into rivers of mud. And Olivia Henderson stood in her yard with an axe raised above her head, wondering if she had the strength to bring it down one more time. Her dark hair hung in soaked strands around her face, rain mingling with tears she refused to acknowledge, and her arms trembled from exhaustion as she faced the log that needed splitting before nightfall. 6 months had passed since Thomas Henderson died from pneumonia, leaving her alone on this small plot of land with nothing but debts, a leaky roof, and winter approaching faster than she could prepare for it. The axe came down crooked, bouncing off the wood and nearly flying from her grip. She stumbled backward, catching herself before she fell into the mud, and let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Everything felt impossible these days. The chickens needed feeding, the fence needed mending, the roof needed patching, and here she was, 24 years old and unable to split a simple piece of firewood. Her hands were blistered and bleeding, her dress soaked through to her skin, and she could not remember the last time she had eaten a full meal because what little food she had went to keeping herself alive enough to work. She raised the axe again, gritting her teeth against the pain in her shoulders. "Madam, you are going to hurt yourself." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady, and Olivia spun around so fast she nearly lost her footing in the mud. A man sat astride a bay horse just beyond her fence, rain pouring off the brim of his hat. He was tall even sitting down, with broad shoulders and the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. She could not see his face clearly in the rain, but something in his posture suggested patience rather than threat. "I do not need help," she said, hating how her voice shook. Strange men did not often mean well for women alone, and she had learned to be cautious. "I can see that," he said, and there was no mockery in his tone, just a quiet observation. "But if you bring that axe down the way you were about to, you are going to split your foot instead of that log." Olivia looked down at her stance and realized he was right. She had positioned herself all wrong in her exhaustion. Heat flooded her cheeks despite the cold rain. The man dismounted in one fluid motion and tied his horse to her fence post. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 27 or 28, with dark blonde hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. His clothes were worn but clean, the clothes of a working man, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. "I am Theodore Rawlings," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I worked on the cattle drive that just came through, been riding for 3 months straight, and my boss paid me out this morning. I was heading to the saloon when I saw you out here." "Then you should go to the saloon," Olivia said, but her grip on the axe loosened slightly. There was something honest in his face, in the direct way he looked at her without letting his gaze wander inappropriately. "Probably," Theodore agreed. He glanced at her woodpile, which was pitifully small for the coming winter, then at the pile of unsplit logs. "But I have been sleeping on the ground for months, eating dust and listening to cattle. Chopping wood in the rain sounds like a pleasant change. Would you let me?" "I cannot pay you," Olivia said immediately. Pride demanded she say it, even though every muscle in her body screamed for rest. "Did not ask you to." Theodore took a step closer, holding out his hand for the axe. "Sometimes a man does something because it needs doing." Olivia hesitated, studying his face. His eyes were blue-gray, the color of storm clouds, and they held a steadiness that made her want to trust him. But trust had cost her dearly before. Still, her hands were bleeding, her arms shook with fatigue, and winter would not wait for her pride to catch up with her needs. She handed him the axe. Theodore tested its weight, frowned at its dullness, then positioned himself in front of the log she had been fighting. He brought the axe down in one clean motion, and the log split perfectly. He set up another piece, split it, then another. Within minutes, he had accomplished what would have taken her hours, working with the efficient rhythm of someone who had done this countless times before. Olivia stood watching, rain still pouring down, not sure what to do with herself. She should go inside, should get out of the rain, but something kept her rooted there. Perhaps it was the simple shock of someone helping without asking for anything in return. Perhaps it was the way he worked, steady and sure, never looking up or showing off, just doing what needed doing. "You should get dry," Theodore said without pausing in his work. "No sense both of us getting soaked." "It is my wood," Olivia said, then felt foolish. What kind of logic was that? Theodore smiled slightly, still not looking up. "Yes, madam, it is, but you can watch me work just as well from your porch." He had a point. Olivia retreated to the porch, which leaked in 3 places but at least broke the worst of the downpour. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering now that she had stopped moving. The cold cut through her wet dress, but she could not look away from the man in her yard, splitting log after log with mechanical precision. The rain continued for another hour. Theodore worked through all of it, never complaining, never slowing. He split every log in her pile, then stacked the wood neatly under the overhang of her small shed where it would stay dry. When he finished, he returned the axe to her, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect. "You should sharpen that," he said. "A dull blade is more dangerous than a sharp one." "Thank you," Olivia managed. The words felt inadequate for what he had done, but they were all she had. Theodore nodded, untied his horse, and mounted. He looked at her one more time, and something in his expression made her breath catch. It was not desire or calculation, but a kind of recognition, as if he saw in her something familiar, something that resonated with his own experience. "If you need help with anything else, Mrs. Henderson, I am staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street for a few days before I head out again." He rode away before she could ask how he knew her name, though in a town like El Paso, everyone knew everyone's business. She watched until he disappeared into the rain, then looked at her neatly stacked woodpile, more wood than she had managed to prepare in weeks of trying. That night, lying in her bed with the rain drumming on the roof and dripping through the leaks she had tried to patch with rags, Olivia thought about Theodore Rawlings. She thought about his steady hands and quiet competence, the way he had helped without making her feel weak or pitied. She thought about his eyes, storm cloud gray, and the feeling that had passed between them in that final look. She told herself it meant nothing. He was a drifter, a cowboy who would move on to the next job, the next town. Men like that did not stay. She had been married to a man who stayed, and even that had not lasted. She could not afford to think about a stranger with kind eyes and capable hands, but she thought about him anyway. The morning dawned clear and bright, the storm blown through, leaving everything scrubbed clean and smelling of wet earth. Olivia rose early, as she always did, and went about her chores. She fed the chickens, which had produced exactly 3 eggs, barely enough to justify their feed. She checked the fence, finding 2 more posts that needed replacing. She inventoried her food supplies and felt her stomach clench at how little remained. She needed work. Thomas had been a clerk at the general store, a steady job that paid enough to get by. When he died, that income died with him, and widow's work was hard to come by. She could take in sewing, but half the women in town did that. She could try to sell eggs, but everyone had chickens. The small plot of land Thomas had bought produced barely enough vegetables to feed one person, let alone generate income. She was contemplating this grim reality when she heard a knock at her door. Theodore Rawlings stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking somehow larger in the morning light. Behind him she could see a wagon loaded with supplies. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, "I hope I am not intruding." "What is all this?" Olivia asked, eyeing the wagon suspiciously. "Well," Theodore said, and for the first time he looked slightly uncomfortable. "I got to thinking last night about your roof. Those leaks are going to get worse when the real rains come. And I noticed your fence has some posts that need replacing. I bought some supplies and I thought, if you were willing, I could fix those things for you." "I told you I cannot pay you," Olivia said, even as her heart hammered at the thought of a sound roof over her head. "I know that," Theodore said patiently. "But I got paid 3 months' wages yesterday, and I have been sleeping on the ground so long I forgot what it feels like to do an honest day's work that does not involve eating dust behind cattle. If you will let me fix your roof and your fence, you would actually be doing me a favor." "That makes no sense," Olivia said. "Maybe not," Theodore agreed. "But it is the truth anyway. Sometimes a man gets tired of drifting and wants to feel useful in a way that lasts more than the time it takes to drive cattle to market." Olivia looked at him for a long moment, trying to understand what he really wanted. Men did not do things for nothing. There was always a price, always an expectation. But when she looked into Theodore's eyes, she saw only genuine sincerity and something else, something almost like loneliness that mirrored her own. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you." Theodore's face broke into a smile, and it transformed him, made him look younger and less weathered. "I will get started then." He worked all day. Olivia tried to focus on her own tasks, but she found herself constantly aware of him, of the sound of hammering on her roof, of his figure moving along her fence line. Around midday, guilt and something else she did not want to name drove her to bring him water and some of her precious bread with butter. "You do not have to feed me," Theodore said, but he accepted the food gratefully, eating it standing up, too polite to sit on her porch without invitation. "Sit down," Olivia heard herself say. "You have been working all morning, you can rest for a few minutes." Theodore sat on the porch step, and after a moment's hesitation, Olivia sat beside him, leaving a proper distance between them. They ate in companionable silence, and Olivia found herself studying him in quick glances. He had good hands, scarred and calloused from hard work, but with long fingers that moved with unexpected grace. His profile was strong, with a straight nose and firm jaw, and when he caught her looking, she felt heat flood her face. "How long were you married?" Theodore asked quietly. 3 years, Olivia said. "Thomas was a good man. He just got sick and there was nothing anyone could do." "I am sorry." "So am I." She paused, then asked, "What about you? Do you have family?" "Had a family once," Theodore said, looking out at the horizon. "My parents had a small ranch up in Kansas. My father died when I was 16, my mother 2 years later. I tried to keep the ranch going, but the bank took it. Been working cattle drives ever since, saving up to maybe buy some land of my own someday." "That sounds lonely," Olivia said softly. "It is," Theodore admitted. "Gets old, always moving, never having a place that is yours. But a man does what he has to do." They sat quietly for a moment longer, and Olivia felt something shift inside her chest. This man understood loneliness, understood loss. He was not just being kind out of pity. He was reaching out from his own isolation to hers, building a bridge neither of them had asked for but both seemed to need. "I should get back to work," Theodore said finally, standing and brushing crumbs from his pants. "Want to finish your roof before dark." Olivia watched him return to his work, and for the first time in 6 months, the weight on her chest felt slightly lighter. Theodore returned the next day, and the day after that. He finished the roof and the fence, then noticed other things that needed fixing. A loose step, a door that stuck, a window that would not close properly. Each day he came with his tools and his quiet competence, and each day Olivia found reasons to work outside where she could see him, could bring him water or share her meager lunch. They talked more each day, the conversations growing longer and more personal. Theodore told her about life on the trail, about the cattle drives and the men he worked with, the vast emptiness of the range and the stars at night. Olivia told him about her life before Thomas died, about growing up in Missouri and coming to Texas as a new bride, hopeful and naive about what life would bring. "Do you ever regret it?" Theodore asked one afternoon. They were sitting on her porch again, taking a break from work. He had been fixing her chicken coop, which had been falling apart. "Coming out here." "Sometimes," Olivia admitted. "But what good does regret do? I am here and I have to make the best of it." "You are stronger than you think," Theodore said, and there was such conviction in his voice that Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not feel strong," she whispered. "I feel like I am drowning, and every day I barely manage to keep my head above water." Theodore reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. His was rough and warm, completely engulfing hers, and the touch sent a shock through her entire body. "You are still here," he said quietly. "You are still fighting. That is strength, Mrs. Henderson." "Olivia," she said, her voice barely audible. "You can call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, and her name in his voice sounded like something precious. They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, neither moving nor speaking. Olivia felt the warmth of his hand spreading through her, thawing something she had thought frozen forever. It terrified her, this feeling, this opening up of possibility when she had convinced herself nothing good could happen again. Theodore seemed to feel it too. He released her hand slowly, as if reluctant to break the contact. "I should go," he said. "It is getting late." But he returned the next morning and the morning after that. A routine developed. He would arrive after breakfast and work on whatever needed doing. She would bring him water and food, and they would sit and talk. Sometimes the conversations were light, full of small observations about the weather or the town. Sometimes they grew deeper, touching on hopes and fears and dreams deferred. "What would you do?" Olivia asked him one day. "If you could do anything, if money were no concern." Theodore thought for a moment, his eyes distant. "I would buy land," he said finally. "Not a big ranch, nothing fancy, just enough for some cattle, a good house, maybe some horses. I would build something that lasts, something that cannot be taken away. And I would have a family. A wife who wants to build something with me, children to leave it to, something real and permanent." "That sounds nice," Olivia said, and she could picture it so clearly. Theodore on his own land, children running around his feet, a woman by his side. The image made her chest ache with longing. "What about you?" Theodore asked. "If you could have anything." Olivia had not let herself dream in so long that the question felt dangerous. But sitting here with Theodore, with the autumn sun warm on her face and his eyes so earnest on hers, she let herself imagine. "I would want to feel safe again," she said quietly. "Not just physically safe, but safe in my heart. I would want to know that tomorrow will be all right, that I will not lose everything again. And I would want someone to share it with, someone who sees me as more than just a burden to be managed." "You are not a burden," Theodore said fiercely. "Any man who cannot see your worth is a fool." The intensity in his voice made Olivia's heart race. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth written plainly on his face. This was not just kindness or pity. Theodore Rawlings was falling in love with her, and the terrifying, wonderful truth was that she was falling in love with him too. "Theodore," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know," he said softly. "I know it is too soon, and I know I have no right." I am just a cowboy with nothing to offer but hard work and a dream that might never happen. But Olivia, I need you to know that these past weeks, working here talking with you, have been the happiest I can remember. You make me want to stay, to stop drifting and build something real. You barely know me, Olivia whispered, but her heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own voice. I know enough, Theodore said. I know you are brave and strong and kind. I know you laugh at my bad jokes and you notice when I am tired. I know that, when I see you first thing in the morning, my whole day feels brighter. And I know that the thought of leaving here, of never seeing you again, feels like tearing my own heart out. Olivia felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in months, they were not tears of grief or exhaustion. They were tears of hope, of possibility, of a future she had not dared to imagine. I am afraid, she admitted. I am so afraid of losing again, of opening my heart and having it destroyed. I do not know if I am strong enough to survive that twice. Theodore reached up and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. The gesture was so tender, so careful, that it made her breath catch. I cannot promise I will never die, he said quietly. None of us can promise that, but I can promise that if you give me a chance, I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will work hard, I will be faithful, and I will love you with everything I have. You would never have to wonder if you are valued or wanted. You would know it every single day. How can you be so sure? Olivia asked. How can you know after just a few weeks? Because I have been drifting for 8 years, Theodore said. I have been from Kansas to Texas and back again, working ranch after ranch, never finding a place that felt like home. And then I saw you chopping wood in the rain, so determined and stubborn and brave, and something in me just knew. You are my home, Olivia. Not a place, not a piece of land, but you. Olivia looked into his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had been steady and kind from the first moment, and she felt something inside her give way. She was tired of being afraid, tired of protecting herself from life. Theodore was offering her everything she had thought lost forever: partnership, security, love. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Theodore's face lit up with such joy that it took her breath away. Yes, Olivia said more firmly. Yes, I will give us a chance. Yes, I want to build something with you. Yes. Theodore laughed, a sound of pure happiness, and before she could think, before she could second-guess herself, he pulled her into his arms. Olivia stiffened for just a moment, then melted into the embrace, wrapping her arms around his solid warmth. She could feel his heart pounding against her cheek, could smell sun and sweat and wood smoke on his skin. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right in so long. Thank you, Theodore murmured into her hair. Thank you for taking a chance on me. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other on the porch of her small house while the world continued around them. Olivia felt something she had thought dead stirring back to life in her chest. It was fragile and tentative, this new happiness, but it was real. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, shy and awkward like young people courting for the first time. I should probably court you properly, Theodore said, sounding almost embarrassed. Take you to dinner, walk with you in town, do things the right way. I would like that, Olivia said. Though you have already done more for me than most men would do for a wife of 20 years. I am just getting started, Theodore promised. He was true to his word. Over the following weeks, Theodore courted Olivia with an earnestness that touched her heart. He took her to dinner at the hotel restaurant, the nicest place in El Paso, and did not flinch at the cost. He brought her small gifts, nothing extravagant because he did not have money for that, but thoughtful things. A hair ribbon the color of the sky, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, a jar of honey from a ranch outside town. They walked together in the evenings when the day's work was done and the heat had faded to something bearable. Theodore told her more about his dreams, becoming animated when he talked about the kind of ranch he wanted to build. Olivia found herself caught up in his vision, adding her own ideas, imagining curtains in the windows and a garden by the kitchen door. The town noticed, of course. El Paso was small enough that everyone knew everyone's business, and the sight of the widow Henderson walking with the cowboy became fodder for gossip. Most of it was harmless, old women clucking about whether it was too soon, men approving of Theodore's character, having seen him around town and judged him solid. But some of the talk was less kind. Olivia heard whispers that she had trapped him somehow, that she was desperate and he was just being polite. She heard people question what a decent cowboy wanted with a poor widow who had nothing to offer. The words stung, even though she tried to ignore them. Theodore noticed her mood after one particularly difficult trip to the general store, where several women had fallen silent when she entered, and then resumed talking loudly about women who had no shame. What happened? He asked that evening as they sat on her porch. Nothing, Olivia said, but she could not meet his eyes. Olivia. Theodore's voice was gentle but firm. Tell me. So she did, haltingly, feeling ashamed even though the shame was not hers to carry. Theodore listened quietly, his jaw tightening with each word. People are cruel, he said when she finished. They are small and bored and they make themselves feel bigger by making others feel small. But Olivia, look at me. She raised her eyes to his. I do not care what anyone in this town thinks, Theodore said fiercely. I did not fall in love with you because I was trapped or because I felt sorry for you. I fell in love with you because you are remarkable. You are strong and brave and kind, and when I am with you, I feel like the man I always wanted to be. If people cannot see that, that is their failure, not ours. I just do not want to be an embarrassment to you, Olivia said softly. An embarrassment? Theodore looked genuinely baffled. Olivia, I am a cowboy with $8 to my name and no prospects beyond the next cattle drive. You own land, you have made a life here even after tragedy. If anyone should worry about being an embarrassment, it is me. That is ridiculous, Olivia said. You are hardworking and honest and good. Then we agree, Theodore said with a small smile. We are both hardworking and honest and good, and anyone who says different can go to hell. Olivia laughed despite herself, shocked by his language but charmed by his vehemence. Theodore Rawlings, that is no way to talk. Maybe not, he agreed, but it is the truth. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that had become familiar and dear. Marry me, he said suddenly. Olivia's breath caught. What? Marry me, Theodore repeated. I know we have not been courting long by normal standards, but Olivia, I am more sure of you than I have been of anything in my life. Marry me. Let me take care of you and your property. Let me be your husband and your partner. Let us build the life we both want together. You have no money, Olivia said, but her heart was racing with hope. How would we manage? I have some saved, Theodore said. Enough to see us through the winter if we are careful. And I already have a job lined up for the spring, working on the Collins Ranch just outside town. It is not a cattle drive, so I would be home every night. The pay is steady. We would be all right, Olivia. Maybe not rich, maybe not easy, but we would be together and we would make it work. The Collins Ranch. Olivia felt a flutter of excitement. That is a good ranch. John Collins is a fair man. He is, Theodore agreed. I talked to him last week. He needs a foreman, someone to manage the hands and oversee the operation. It is steady work, Olivia. Real work that builds to something. Olivia looked at him, at this man who had come into her life like an answer to prayers she had not dared to pray. He was offering her everything she needed: security, partnership, love. But more than that, he was offering her himself, wholly and without reservation. "Yes," she said, and the word came out strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you." Theodore whooped with joy, actually whooped like a boy, and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, they were both breathing hard, both grinning like fools. "When?" Theodore asked. "When can we get married?" "As soon as possible," Olivia said. "I do not want a big wedding, just something simple at the church." "This Sunday," Theodore said decisively. "I will talk to Reverend Matthews tomorrow. We can get married Sunday after service, in front of whoever wants to witness it." "Sunday," Olivia repeated, testing the word. 3 days away. In 3 days she would be married again, would have a partner and a future. It felt too good to be true, but Theodore's solid presence, the warmth of his hands on her waist, made it real. They spent the next 3 days in a whirlwind of preparation. Theodore moved his few possessions from the boarding house to Olivia's small home. Olivia cleaned and cooked, preparing for the meal they would share after the ceremony. She had no money for a new dress, so she mended her best one, taking in the waist that had grown loose from months of not eating enough. The night before the wedding, Theodore stayed at the boarding house, observing propriety even though they were both adults who had been married before. Olivia lay awake in her bed, simultaneously excited and terrified. She was taking a leap of faith, trusting this man with her future, with her heart. What if something went wrong? What if she lost him like she had lost Thomas? But no, she could not think like that. She could not live her life afraid of loss. Theodore was right that no one could promise tomorrow, but they could promise today, could choose each other right now and build something worth having. Sunday dawned clear and beautiful. Olivia dressed carefully, her hands shaking slightly as she buttoned her dress. She braided her hair and pinned it up, tucking in the blue ribbon Theodore had given her. When she looked at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Her cheeks had color again, and her eyes held light instead of just weariness. Love, she realized, looked good on her. Theodore met her at the church, and the sight of him took her breath away. He wore a new shirt, clean and pressed, and had clearly visited the barber that morning. He looked nervous and hopeful and so handsome that her heart ached. "You look beautiful," he said softly, taking her hands. "So do you," Olivia said, then laughed. "Handsome, I mean. You look handsome." "I know what you meant," Theodore said, smiling. The ceremony was simple, attended by a handful of townspeople who wished them well and a larger handful who came out of curiosity. Olivia did not care who was there. She only had eyes for Theodore as they stood before Reverend Matthews and spoke their vows. "I, Theodore Rawlings, take you, Olivia Henderson, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." His voice was steady and sure, his eyes never leaving hers. "I, Olivia Henderson, take you, Theodore Rawlings, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." Her voice shook slightly, but she meant every word with her whole heart. Reverend Matthews pronounced them man and wife, and Theodore kissed her there in the church, gentle and sweet and full of promise. Olivia felt tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears, joyful tears, tears of gratitude for this second chance at happiness. They walked back to their home through the Sunday quiet, hand in hand, husband and wife. It felt surreal, like a dream Olivia might wake up from at any moment. But the pressure of Theodore's hand in hers was real, and the sound of his voice was real, and the future stretching before them was real. That night, in the home that was now theirs together, Theodore held Olivia with a tenderness that made her cry. He was patient and gentle, asking permission with every touch, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When he made love to her, it was with a reverence that told her more clearly than words how precious she was to him. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Olivia felt a peace she had not known in years. This was home. Not the house, not the land, but this feeling of being held and valued and loved. "Are you happy?" Theodore murmured into her hair. "Yes," Olivia said, and it was the absolute truth. "Are you?" "Happier than I knew I could be," Theodore said. He tightened his arms around her. "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for taking the axe that day," Olivia said sleepily. "Thank you for seeing me." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and when morning came, they woke to their first full day as husband and wife. The next months were not easy, but they were good. Theodore worked long hours at the Collins Ranch, coming home tired but satisfied. Olivia managed their home and their small plot of land, coaxing vegetables from the soil and tending the chickens that finally began producing enough eggs to sell. With Theodore's steady income and Olivia's careful management, they began to build a small cushion of savings. Winter came, but this time Olivia did not face it alone. Theodore kept the fires burning and the roof patched. They spent long evenings together, talking and planning their future. Theodore taught Olivia to read the stars, the way he had learned on the trail. Olivia taught Theodore to cook beyond basic trail food, and they laughed together over his early disasters. "I can burn water," Theodore said ruefully one evening, staring at a pot of beans he had somehow managed to scorch. "It is a talent," Olivia agreed, biting back a smile. "A useless one," Theodore said, but he was smiling too. They made love often, discovering each other's bodies and preferences, building an intimacy that was both physical and emotional. Olivia had never felt so desired, so cherished. Theodore treated her like she was precious, like she was the answer to all his prayers. Spring brought new life in more ways than one. The land began to green, the harsh winter finally releasing its grip. And Olivia realized that her monthly courses had not come in 2 months. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex mixture of joy and fear. She had always wanted children, but pregnancy carried risks, and childbirth had killed more than one woman she knew. What if something went wrong? What if she died and left Theodore alone? But when she told him, his reaction swept away her fears. Theodore's face lit up with such pure happiness that it was impossible not to share it. "A baby," he said wonderingly, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy?" Theodore laughed. "Olivia, I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. We are going to have a child, a person who is half you and half me. How could I be anything but overjoyed?" His joy was infectious, and Olivia let herself feel it fully. They were going to be parents. They were building a family, building a future. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia felt sick in the mornings for the first few months, but Theodore was endlessly patient, bringing her water and crackers and holding her hair when she needed to be sick. As her belly grew, he became almost comically protective, fretting over her lifting anything heavier than a dishcloth. "Theodore, I am pregnant, not broken," Olivia said one afternoon when he tried to stop her from gathering eggs. "I know," Theodore said, "but you are carrying precious cargo." "Our child, I just want to make sure you are both safe." His concern was sweet, even when it became overbearing. Olivia learned to let him help, to accept his care without feeling like she was weak. It was hard for her, this acceptance. She had been alone for so long, had relied only on herself. Trusting someone else to carry some of the burden felt dangerous, but Theodore never failed her. Every day, he proved himself reliable, steady, committed. He worked hard at the ranch and harder at home, always making sure Olivia had everything she needed. He talked to her growing belly, telling their unborn child stories about the stars and the cattle drives and how beautiful their mother was. "You are going to have the best mama in the world," he said one night, his lips pressed against Olivia's stomach. "She is brave and strong and kind, and she is going to love you so much." Olivia ran her fingers through his hair, overcome with emotion. This man, this wonderful man, had become her entire world. She loved him with an intensity that sometimes scared her, but she was learning to embrace it, to let herself feel fully without fear. Summer came hot and bright. Olivia's belly swelled, and she felt the baby move inside her, small flutters that grew into definite kicks. Theodore would place his hand on her stomach and laugh with delight when the baby kicked against his palm. "Strong," he said approvingly, "just like the mama." "Or the papa," Olivia said. "You are pretty strong yourself." They prepared for the baby's arrival, transforming the small storage room off their bedroom into a nursery. Theodore built a cradle with his own hands, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, carving their initials and the baby's due date into the wood. Olivia sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small the garments were. "How can a person be this small?" she wondered aloud, holding up a little gown. "They start small and grow big," Theodore said, "like our love." Olivia smiled at the sentiment even as she rolled her eyes at his romantic nature. "That was extremely sentimental." "You love it," Theodore said confidently. "I do," Olivia admitted. "I love you, and I love you," Theodore said, kissing her softly. "More every day." Labor began on a hot August night, 3 days after Olivia's due date. The first contractions woke her from sleep, and she lay still for a moment, testing the sensation, making sure it was real. When the next one came, stronger and more insistent, she knew. "Theodore," she said, shaking his shoulder. "Theodore, wake up, it is time." Theodore shot upright, instantly awake and slightly panicked. "Time, the baby, now." "Yes, now," Olivia said, breathing through another contraction. "You need to get Mrs. Garcia." Mrs. Garcia was the midwife, a competent woman who had delivered half the babies in El Paso. Theodore pulled on his pants, hopping on one foot in his haste. "I will be right back," he promised. "Do not have the baby until I get back." "I will do my best," Olivia said dryly. Theodore ran out into the night, and Olivia heard him pounding on Mrs. Garcia's door 3 houses down. She took advantage of his absence to change into her birthing gown and lay towels on the bed. The contractions were coming regularly now, still far apart, but definitely establishing a pattern. Theodore returned with Mrs. Garcia, who swept into the house with her bag and her no-nonsense manner. She examined Olivia, asked questions, and pronounced everything progressing normally. "First babies take their time," she said. "This will be a while yet." "Mr. Rawlings, why do not you boil some water and make yourself useful?" Theodore looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to stay by Olivia's side, but Mrs. Garcia shooed him out. Olivia almost laughed at his kicked puppy expression. "He can come back soon," Mrs. Garcia said to Olivia. "But right now we need to focus." "How are you feeling?" "Scared," Olivia admitted. "It hurts more than I expected." "It will hurt more before it is done," Mrs. Garcia said honestly. "But you are strong. You will get through this." The labor lasted through the night and into the next day. Theodore stayed close, holding Olivia's hand through contractions, wiping sweat from her forehead, murmuring encouragements. Olivia had never felt pain like this, wave after wave of it, relentless and exhausting. There were moments when she was sure she could not do it, could not survive this. But Theodore was there, solid and unshakable. "You can do this," he said over and over. You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." And somehow, with him believing in her, Olivia found the strength to push through. When Mrs. Garcia finally said it was time to push, Olivia bore down with everything she had, Theodore supporting her back, his voice in her ear urging her on. "One more," Mrs. Garcia said. "One more big push." Olivia pushed, and suddenly there was release and relief and the sound of a baby crying. Theodore was laughing and crying at the same time, and Mrs. Garcia was saying, "It is a boy. You have a son. A son." Olivia held out shaking arms, and Mrs. Garcia placed the baby on her chest, still covered in vernix and blood but absolutely perfect. He had dark hair and a red, squished face, and Olivia fell in love instantly, completely, irrevocably. "Hello," she whispered, touching his tiny hand with one finger. "Hello, little one." Theodore leaned over them both, his face wet with tears. "He is perfect," he said, his voice choked. "Olivia, he is perfect." "What will you name him?" Mrs. Garcia asked, efficiently cleaning up while giving them space to bond. Olivia and Theodore looked at each other. They had discussed names, but somehow all the options they had considered felt wrong now that they were looking at their actual son. "What do you think?" Olivia asked Theodore. Theodore studied his son's face, then smiled. "James," he said. "James Thomas Rawlings. After my father and your first husband." Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. The gesture was so thoughtful, so generous. Theodore was honoring her past while building their future, acknowledging that Thomas had been important to her without feeling threatened by it. "James Thomas Rawlings," she repeated. "It is perfect." The first weeks with James were both wonderful and exhausting. He was a hungry baby, waking every 2 hours to nurse, leaving Olivia bleary-eyed and sore. But every time she looked at him, at his tiny perfect features, and the way he gripped her finger with surprising strength, her heart overflowed with love. Theodore was a devoted father from the first moment. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with James when he fussed, sang him lullabies in a surprisingly good voice. Watching Theodore with their son, Olivia fell in love with him all over again. "You are a natural at this," she said one night, watching Theodore rock James to sleep. "Am I?" Theodore looked pleased. "I feel like I am making it up as I go." "We both are," Olivia said. "But we are doing it together, and that makes all the difference." As James grew, the little house that had once seemed empty and lonely became filled with life and laughter. James was a happy baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. Theodore would hold him up to see the horses when he came home from work, talking to him seriously about cattle and ranching as if James could understand every word. "It is never too early to learn," Theodore said when Olivia teased him about it. "He is 4 months old," Olivia pointed out. "Exactly," Theodore said. 4 months is plenty old enough to know about horses." Their finances continued to improve. John Collins was so impressed with Theodore's work that he gave him a raise and more responsibilities. Olivia started selling eggs and vegetables at the market, bringing in enough extra money that they began to talk seriously about buying more land. "If we could get another 5 acres, Theodore said one evening, studying a map of the area, "we could run some cattle of our own. Not many, just enough to start building our own herd." "That would be wonderful," Olivia said. She was nursing James, who was drowsy and content. "Do you think we can afford it?" "Not yet," Theodore admitted. "But maybe in another year or 2. If we keep saving, if nothing goes wrong, we could make it happen." Nothing went wrong. The years passed peacefully, each one building on the last. They bought the extra land when James was 2, and Theodore started their small herd with 5 head of cattle. It was not much, but it was theirs, the foundation of something bigger. James grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy. He had Olivia's dark hair and Theodore's gray eyes, and he followed his father everywhere, determined to help with every task. Theodore was endlessly patient with him, teaching him about animals and the land, instilling in him the values of hard work and honesty. When James was 4, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. The news filled her with the same mixture of joy and trepidation as the first time, but she was less afraid now. She knew what to expect, knew she could survive it. "Another baby," Theodore said, holding James on his lap while Olivia told them both the news. "What do you think about that, James? You are going to be a big brother. Can I play with the baby?" James asked seriously. "When the baby is big enough," Olivia said. "At first, babies are very small and fragile." "I will be careful," James promised solemnly. This pregnancy was harder than the first. Olivia was older now, nearly 30, and she felt every ache and pain more keenly. But Theodore and James rallied around her, taking over household tasks and making sure she rested. James would bring her wildflowers and tell her stories to make her feel better, his little face so earnest that it made her heart squeeze with love. The baby arrived in early spring, another labor that lasted hours but ended with the miracle of new life. This time it was a girl, with downy blonde hair and blue eyes that would likely darken with time. "Rose," Olivia said immediately, looking at her daughter's perfect face. "Her name is Rose." "Rose Olivia Rawlings," Theodore added, and Olivia nodded, too tired and happy to speak. James was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Theodore had to gently remind him to be gentle, that babies were delicate. But James was a careful, sweet big brother, singing to Rose the way Theodore had once sung to him. Life settled into a new rhythm with 4 of them instead of 3. The house felt full in the best way, full of noise and love and the organized chaos that came with small children. Theodore continued to work at the Collins Ranch, but spent every spare moment building their own little operation. The cattle herd grew slowly but steadily. Olivia managed the house and the garden and the children, somehow balancing all the demands with grace. There were hard times. The year Rose turned 2, a drought hit hard and they lost some of their cattle. Money was tight, and there were nights when Olivia and Theodore lay awake worrying about how to make ends meet. But they weathered it together, cutting expenses and working harder, never losing faith in their eventual success. "We have been through worse," Theodore reminded her during one particularly stressful evening. "We will get through this too." "I know," Olivia said, "but it is frightening." "It is," Theodore agreed. He pulled her close. "But we have each other and we have the children. We have what matters most. Everything else we can figure out." He was right. The drought ended, the rains returned, and their fortunes improved. By the time James was 8 and Rose was 4, they had 30 head of cattle and were respected members of the community. Theodore had become foreman of the Collins Ranch, a position of real authority and a salary that finally allowed them to feel secure. John Collins approached Theodore one evening as he was finishing up work. "Theodore, can I speak with you a moment?" "Of course, Mr. Collins," Theodore said. "I have been thinking about the future of this ranch," Collins said. He was an older man in his 60s with no children of his own. "I am not getting any younger and I need someone I can trust to help me run this operation. I would like to make you a partner, Theodore. Not a full partner, not yet, but a significant stake in the ranch. What do you say?" Theodore was stunned. A partnership in the Collins Ranch would change everything for his family. It would mean real security, real wealth, the kind of future he had dreamed about but never quite believed would happen. "Mr. Collins, I do not know what to say," Theodore managed. "Say yes," Collins said with a smile. "You have earned it, Theodore. You have worked hard, you are honest, and you know this land as well as I do. I need someone to help me carry this forward, and I cannot think of anyone I trust more." "Yes," Theodore said, his voice strong. "Yes, sir, I would be honored." When he told Olivia that night, she cried happy tears and hugged him so hard he could barely breathe. The children danced around them, not fully understanding but caught up in their parents' joy. "We did it," Olivia said, looking up at Theodore with shining eyes. "We built something real." "We did," Theodore agreed. "Together." The partnership transformed their lives. With his new income, Theodore was able to buy more land, expanding their personal holdings beyond anything they had dreamed. They built a new house, not grand but comfortable, with room for the children to grow and maybe, Olivia thought secretly, room for more children if they were blessed. She was blessed. At 33, she found herself pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one. Theodore was thrilled. James was old enough to be genuinely excited about another sibling, and Rose announced she wanted a baby brother this time. "We do not get to choose," Olivia explained gently. "Then I will ask God," Rose said with a 4-year-old's confidence. "God listens to prayers." God apparently listened to Rose's prayers because this time, Olivia delivered twin boys. The labor was long and difficult, and there was a moment when Mrs. Garcia looked worried, when Theodore's hand gripped her so hard it hurt. But then the first baby came, and then the second, 2 healthy boys who immediately started crying at the injustice of being born. "Twins," Theodore said, laughing through his tears. "We have twin boys." They named them Peter and Paul, simple, solid names for 2 boys who would grow up close as only twins could be. James was delighted to have brothers, and Rose graciously accepted that God had given her 2 brothers instead of the one she asked for. The house that had once held just Olivia, alone and struggling, now overflowed with family. There were toys scattered on the floor, children's laughter ringing through the rooms, meals that required a large table to fit everyone. Olivia would stand sometimes in the midst of the chaos and feel overwhelmed with gratitude for the life she had built. Theodore seemed to feel the same. "Do you remember," he said one evening after the children were finally asleep and they had a rare moment of peace, "the day we met? You were chopping wood in the rain and you looked so determined and so tired." "I remember," Olivia said. "I remember thinking you were going to be like all the other men who had offered help, expecting something in return." "And I just wanted to help," Theodore said. "But then I fell in love with you." "I fell in love with you too," Olivia said softly. "I did not want to, I was so afraid, but I could not help it." "I am glad you could not help it," Theodore said. He pulled her into his arms. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Olivia. A home, a family, a purpose. You made me want to be a better man." "You were already a good man," Olivia said. "You just needed someone to see it." They kissed, sweet and familiar, the kiss of 2 people who had weathered storms together and come out stronger. Olivia thought about the woman she had been that rainy day, alone and desperate and barely holding on. That woman would not have believed this future was possible. But here it was, real and solid and hers. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. James grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Rose became a beautiful, spirited girl who kept her brothers in line and had her father wrapped around her finger. The twins were wild and adventurous, constantly getting into mischief but good-hearted underneath it all. Theodore's partnership with John Collins deepened. When Collins died at age 72, he left half the ranch to Theodore in his will, recognizing the man who had been like a son to him. Theodore was overwhelmed by the gift, by the trust Collins had placed in him. The Collins ranch, combined with their own holdings, made the Rawlings family one of the most prosperous in the county, but prosperity did not change them. Theodore still worked every day alongside his men, still came home tired and satisfied from physical labor. Olivia still tended her garden and her chickens, still baked bread and sewed clothes. They had money now, more than they needed, but they remembered what it was like to struggle. They were generous with those who needed help, offering work to drifters and helping neighbors in hard times. "We were given help when we needed it," Theodore said when Olivia praised his generosity. "We should pass that on." One day, when she was 40 and Theodore was 43, Olivia stood on the porch of their comfortable home and looked out over the land they owned. James was 21 now, working alongside his father, being groomed to eventually take over. Rose was 17, beautiful and clever, with suitors already coming around despite Theodore's protective glowering. The twins were 13, finally starting to settle down from their wildest impulses. Theodore came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Olivia said. "How far we have come, how different life is from what I imagined." "Good different?" Theodore asked. "The best different," Olivia confirmed. She turned in his arms to face him. "I was thinking about that day you took the axe from my hands. I was at the end of my strength, barely holding on, and you just appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not even prayed." "I think maybe you were the answer to my prayer," Theodore said. "I had been drifting for so long, and then I saw you and everything just made sense." "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked. "Taking on a widow with nothing?" "Never," Theodore said fiercely. "Not for one single moment." "You were never nothing, Olivia. You were everything. You still are." He kissed her, and Olivia kissed him back, grateful for this man who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting. A family, a legacy, a love that had weathered every storm. That evening, with the whole family gathered around the dinner table, Olivia looked at each face she loved. James, so like his father in temperament and looks. Rose, with Olivia's determination and Theodore's charm. Peter and Paul, still finding their way but surrounded by love that would guide them. And Theodore, her rock, her partner, her great love. "I want to make a toast," Olivia said, raising her glass of water. Everyone quieted, looking at her with curiosity. "To family," Olivia said. "To the people we choose and the people we are blessed with. To hard work and faith and never giving up. And to your father, who took a chance on a struggling widow and gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "To Pa," James said, raising his glass, and the others echoed him. Theodore's eyes were suspiciously bright. "And to your mother," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "who took a chance on a drifting cowboy and made him want to stay. You gave me a home, Olivia. You gave me everything." They drank, and then the children started talking again, the moment passing into the comfortable chaos of family dinner. But Olivia caught Theodore's eye across the table, and the look they exchanged said everything that needed saying. Love, gratitude, commitment, joy. A whole conversation in a glance, the way only couples who had weathered years together could communicate. Later that night, lying in bed with Theodore's arm around her, Olivia thought about the story of her life. It had started with loss and struggle, with grief that felt like it would swallow her whole. But then a cowboy had taken an axe from her tired hands, and everything had changed. He had not just helped her split wood. He had split open her heart, letting light back in, teaching her that it was possible to love again, to trust again, to build again. "What are you smiling about?" Theodore murmured, half asleep. "Just thinking about wood chopping," Olivia said. Theodore chuckled. "That is a strange thing to smile about." "Not so strange," Olivia said. "Not when it changed my whole life." "Our whole lives," Theodore corrected. He tightened his arm around her. Best decision I ever made taking that axe. Best decision I ever made letting you, Olivia said. They fell asleep like that, the way they had hundreds of nights before and would hundreds of nights to come. Two people who had found each other in the rain and built something beautiful. A family, a ranch, a legacy of love that would continue through their children and their children's children. The years ahead would bring more changes. James would marry and have children of his own, making Olivia and Theodore grandparents. Rose would choose her own path, surprising everyone by becoming a teacher and then opening a school on the ranch for local children. The twins would eventually find their places, one staying on the ranch and one becoming a doctor. Through it all, Olivia and Theodore would be there, the foundation upon which the family was built. When Olivia was 50, a young widow came to their door asking for work. She was desperate, alone, barely holding on. Olivia saw herself in the woman's eyes, saw the fear and exhaustion and determination not to give up. "We can use help in the house," Olivia said immediately. "And there is a small cottage on the property that needs occupying. Would that suit you?" The widow's eyes filled with tears. "I can pay you back," she started to say. "No need," Olivia said firmly. "Someone helped me once when I needed it most. I am just passing it on." Theodore, watching the exchange, smiled and put his arm around Olivia's shoulders. She leaned into him, this man who had taken her hand all those years ago and never let go. They grew old together, Theodore and Olivia, surrounded by the family they had built and the legacy they would leave. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party, inviting half the county. People gave speeches about Theodore's fairness as a boss and Olivia's kindness to those in need. Their grandchildren performed a song. It was overwhelming and wonderful. But the best moment came at the end of the night when everyone had gone home and it was just the two of them again. They sat on their porch, the same porch where Theodore had proposed all those years ago, holding hands and watching the stars. 25 years, Olivia marveled. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "I would do it all again," Theodore said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, with you, always with you. Even the part where I almost took your foot off with that axe," Olivia teased. "Especially that part," Theodore said. "That was where it all started." "No," Olivia said softly. "That was where it all changed. It started the moment you decided to care, the moment you saw someone who needed help and chose to give it without expecting anything in return." "And got everything in return anyway," Theodore said. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "A wife, children, grandchildren, a home, a purpose. Everything I never knew I was looking for." They sat in comfortable silence, these two people who had found each other in the rain and chosen each other every day since. The wind carried the scent of grass and cattle, and the wildflowers Olivia had planted all around the property. In the distance, they could hear the gentle lowing of the cattle, the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Olivia thought about the scared widow she had been, chopping wood in the rain with bleeding hands and a breaking heart. She thought about the moment Theodore had appeared, taking the axe and, without knowing it, taking her heart too. She thought about the courage it had taken to say yes to love again, to trust again, to believe that happiness was still possible. And she looked at the life they had built together, the family that surrounded them, the love that had only deepened with time. Every difficult moment had been worth it. Every fear she had overcome had led her here, to this porch, with this man, surrounded by proof that love could heal, could build, could last. "I love you," she said to Theodore, the same words she had said thousands of times before but which never lost their meaning. "I love you too," Theodore said, the same response he had given thousands of times before but which he meant more with each repetition. They sat together as the stars came out, one by one, painting the Texas sky with light. Two people who had found each other in a storm and created a life of sunshine. Two people who had taken a chance on love and been rewarded beyond measure. Two people who would face whatever came next together, just as they had faced everything together since that rainy day in September 1878. The story of Theodore Rawlings and Olivia Henderson was not a grand tale of adventure or drama. It was simpler than that, and in its simplicity, more profound. It was a story of two lonely people finding each other and choosing each other. Of hard work and perseverance, of building something lasting from nothing but determination and love. Of a cowboy who took an axe from a widow's hands and ended up taking her hand in marriage, forever. It was a love story, plain and true, the kind that happens in quiet moments and lasts a lifetime. The kind worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. And as Theodore and Olivia sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built, they knew they had been blessed beyond measure. Not because their life had been easy, but because they had faced the hard parts together and come out stronger for it. The end.